Well, welcome. My name's Jann Freed, but you can call me Dr. Jann. I am hosting a Leadership Legacy Summit, and I've been interviewing all kinds of people over the past several weeks. And today I'm fortunate enough to interview Rebecca Zucker. Rebecca is an expert in executive coaching as well as leadership and career development. Rebecca coaches senior leaders across the globe, including C-level executives. In fact, she has just an impressive list of clients, including Amazon, Clorox, Dropbox, eBay, just to mention a few. Rebecca is a contributor to Harvard Business Review and Forbes.com and is frequently quoted in the press on career and leadership issues. She received her coaching training and certification from the Coaches Training Institute and from Minds at Work. And there's a whole lot more I could say, but we want to get into the question. So thank you, Rebecca, for helping me with this.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Great. Well, we're going to start off with what causes, again, this is almost like a perfect topic for these times, but what causes overwhelm and how does overwhelm differ from pressure, stress, burnout? This is an area in which, you really focus. So when did overwhelm become the norm? So tell us more about overwhelm. In fact, I think a lot of us are feeling overwhelmed. Okay.
Yes, a lot of us are, myself included at times. I'm still human. So I learn a lot from other people. I learn a lot from my clients. And even pre-pandemic, I have been seeing a lot of people get overwhelmed. And essentially, overwhelm is an inner experience. There's a lot of overload, which is the stuff that's coming at us. Mm-hmm. And I think about overwhelm as the experience we have when whatever it is that we're experiencing is more than we can process in the moment. So you can be overwhelmed with joy, with anxiety, with fear, all different types of emotions. You can be overwhelmed with work. So the feeling of being inundated or you're drowning or you can't keep up. Companies can be overwhelmed or systems can be overwhelmed. So that's really how I think about overwhelm. It differs from pressure, stress, and burnout in that, pressure is all around us. Pressure is what we experience every day from our projects, our deadlines, our customers, our clients, our families. Stress is what we do with that pressure and how we think about it in our minds. And so overwhelm is actually one type of stress. Okay. And again, as I mentioned, it's that inner experience. And burnout is really when we look at chronic stress that goes unchecked or unmanaged, that can result in burning out.
Right. Wow. No, that's interesting. Well, talk to us about some strategies. What do we do about it? If we're going to overturn this overwhelm, what are some good preventative strategies, some good in the moment, or, what should we do when we're really feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah. Well, let me take the preventative strategies first. And I like to preempt overwhelm so that I don't have to worry about getting or having the experience of the wave crash down on me. I think about a visual of overwhelm as sort of the tsunami building, the tidal wave swelling and starting to come over my head. I like to sort of mitigate the swell is how I think about it. And there are a lot of preventative strategies that you can use. One is just setting and keeping boundaries. And that's a really big one. I have a lot of clients who might set boundaries, but it's a lot more challenging to keep those boundaries. So they might set aside thinking time or personal time, but it just gets scheduled over with more meetings. And I think with respect to that, and I'll talk about this later, it really comes down to challenging our limiting beliefs and assumptions about what will happen or not happen if we do the things we need to do to take care of ourselves. So part of, setting and keeping boundaries is also about setting expectations about what you can and can't do or the resources that are required to do what's being asked of you. And so being able to negotiate for those resources is an important skill set to have also. But we contribute to our overwhelm as well by having perfectionistic tendencies, perhaps, or even being disorganized or highly distracted, as we all are, with so many different things coming at us and interrupting us, and chat and instant message and Slack and all of that stuff. But also looking at breaking down larger or more complex tasks into smaller pieces is really important. And once those are broken down, you can start to think about what can you outsource or delegate so that you don't have to do everything. And a lot of this is also, requires a mindset shift, because a lot of times we do think we have to take it on ourselves, or that we can't say no or push back. And that goes again to the challenging our limiting assumptions and beliefs. And I would say, in particular, during this time, I think people are getting overwhelmed more easily because our capacity is diminished. We have a lot of fatigue going on, not just Zoom fatigue, but emotional, cognitive fatigue, physical fatigue, compassion fatigue for those of us who are managers or in the helping profession. These things are real and they diminish our capacity, which makes us more prone to get overwhelmed. So using preventative strategies to prevent those things from overwhelming us are always helpful. If you are noticing that you are actually getting or are overwhelmed, that the wave is right above you and crashing down, I think the first thing that's most important to do is to stop and notice it and name it. That is more powerful. You can't deal with it until you name it. And being able to pause, notice, and name it helps us deal with it in a constructive way versus a reactive way. And when we're in reactive mode, we are not at our best. We might lash out or be defensive or panic, or do something that's really not helpful to us or others in the moment. I usually recommend to people to try and pinpoint the source of overwhelm, because I think what happens is people tend to feel these feelings unconsciously and hence be more reactive about it. But just by asking yourself the question, what one or two things, if taken off my plate or if I didn't have to deal with it, would relieve 80% of the overwhelm or stress that I'm feeling right now? And to be able to really articulate what those one or two things are so that you can then apply some strategies to address it, whether it's delegating, asking for more resources, negotiating an extension on the deadline, or getting a project reassigned if there's another priority, etc. But you can't deal with the problem until you've pinpointed the source of the problem.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely. Because I think you really, kind of what is the root cause or something. Well, you've mentioned, limiting these limiting beliefs and assumptions.
Yes.
What can we do about that? Or how do we overcome those?
That's a great question. I think the first thing is you have to, again, name what those assumptions are and take a step back to really look at the assumptions versus through them. So the analogy here is that instead of looking through a pair of glasses, we're going to take off the glasses and look at the glasses. So a lot of times I find that people make an assumption around the horrible, awful things that will happen if they say no to something. And that's just one example, but I find that's a common denominator, is a reluctance to push back and say no. And people have pretty primal fears around these things, and they're not necessarily rational. So this is where you need to get out of your head. It's not an intellectual thing. It's a gut thing. So it's like when you think about saying no to your boss or to a colleague, what what is the sort of visceral fear that emerges? What's like the worst feeling in your gut you can muster, and then name what that fear is. And for some people, it's like, I'll get fired, or I'll let others down, or they'll think I'm not committed, or somebody else will do it and outshine me, or I'll look bad, or it won't be important anymore, or my career will stagnate. And they catastrophize, as opposed to really sort of questioning or testing these assumptions. And it may not be just saying no. Oftentimes we have an assumption that, I can't have a two-way conversation with my boss about what's reasonable. Or what my boss tells me to do is a directive and not a discussion.
Yeah. No, those are great examples. And I think we have self-limiting kind of boundaries within ourselves. So that's excellent. Well, if we have people reporting to us, how can we manage their overwhelm? Or, it's one thing to, control it ourselves or try to control it, but how can we help others?
Great question. So I think one of the first key things is to pay attention to your own mental state. There's something called emotional contagion, and negative emotions are actually more contagious than positive emotions. So if we are operating in a way that is showing our overwhelm, sort of displaying it in maybe frantic or panicked behavior, others are likely to feel and act the same way. So it's really about first putting on your own oxygen mask to take care of yourself. Excuse me. So that you can role model for others, calm under pressure. I think it's also checking in with your people and recognizing the visible signs of overwhelm. Not all of the signs will be visible because, like I said, it's an internal experience, but the outward signs might be someone's panicking, or they're dropping the ball, or they're missing deadlines, or they're more impatient or short-tempered, or losing their cool over certain things. Being able to hold a mirror up to these behaviors, to point them out in a kind way that doesn't put the other person on the defensive, but actually, excuse me, allows them to be more curious about their own behavior. Excuse me. So.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. Would you say that a lot of this work and what you've just described, would you put that under resilience? How leaders can learn to be more resilient and help others be more resilient? Is that where you move with this, or what do you think?
Absolutely. It's part of resilience for sure. So the better we are able to deal with overwhelming circumstances or situations, the better we will be able to deal with it going forward.
Yeah, no, excellent. Well, let's shift a little bit and talk about the current crisis that we're living and working in. How has the pandemic affected your work, or how you even think about your work?
Great question. Well, as I alluded to earlier, the pandemic has really, I think, reduced our individual and collective capacity in terms of what we can get done. And any good manager is going to know we need to adjust to the situation and adjust our expectations accordingly. This doesn't mean, my voice. This doesn't mean being lax or not holding people accountable. I've heard from one or two people here or there. Fortunately, it's the minority who's like, now's the time to push on the gas. Like, this is where the opportunities are. No, just as, I think about flattening the curve on expectations, just like we're flattening the curve on infections to be able to have ample hospital capacity. We as individuals have limited capacity, and it's even more limited now. So by adjusting expectations now, we will get much more out of our people in the long run. This is a marathon that we're running, not a sprint.
Yeah, no, it definitely, and it's become a I mean, the marathon could be longer than we think. So this is really interesting. Well, given your
Yeah.
coaching business, what's your best advice right now? If some C-level leader came to you and said, "Boy, I'm really struggling with this. What should I be doing?" What would be kind of
Well,
your top 10 or your checklist or?
well, I would frankly probe into what exactly are they struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, particularly for a senior leader where they feel like they have to have all the answers, this is a challenging time because there's so much uncertainty. And giving themselves some slack to not have all the answers. Self-compassion is a big part of also what we need right now and a big part of resilience. So, and part of the limiting beliefs and assumptions also tie to a lot of leaders are very concerned about upholding a desired image or avoiding a dreaded image. That goes to the limiting beliefs and assumptions. Like if people think I don't have the answers and they're going to lose faith in me and they're going to quit and my company's going to tank. That catastrophization happens in milliseconds for people. So I would want to unpack that.
Right. Yeah. No, excellent. Well, very good. Well, let's shift to kind of my topic right now, and that is legacy.
Sorry, what is it?
Legacy, leadership legacy.
Legacy, okay.
So how do you define, just when I use the word, how do you define legacy? What does it mean to you, just in general?
For me, when I hear the word legacy, I think of what is left behind when you're gone. Mm-hmm. And that could be gone as in 6 feet under gone, or that could be gone as, what is your legacy after you've left the company even?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Can you share a story that comes to mind related to you about legacy or someone else? So again, these are not your questions, these are my questions. So,
yeah.
Whatever comes to mind when I say that.
That's a great question.
Maybe some of the people you've worked with or leaders.
Yeah, when going back to my investment banking days, when I was a junior investment banker, an associate at my firm, there was a vice president who I worked with who really, I would say, probably was one of the few people who I felt really seen by. And they saw and appreciated my talents and they gave me opportunities to shine. And that individual sadly passed away very prematurely. But the legacy that he left behind was really just great memories of him as a leader, as a manager. He touched so many different people's lives, personally and professionally. And, being remembered many years beyond. So that's what I think of when I think of legacy.
Yeah. Do you, when you think of him, have you modeled some of your behaviors after him or tried to do some of the similar things or?
Sure. I think he provided a great example or role model. And I certainly, being a coach, part of what I do is acknowledge people's strengths in addition to helping them develop sort of things that aren't strengths yet. And, making people feel heard and understood.
No, that's great. Given the pandemic, do you think that people will change how they view legacy or what legacy even means during these kind of uncertain, challenging times?
Yeah, I think what's happened, during the pandemic is people are taking a step back to re-examine what's really important to them and what has meaning and purpose, both in their careers and in their lives. So as they think about what they might want to keep or change, that will impact their legacy.
Right. No, excellent. Well, I always like to ask people, my interviewees, what else should I have asked you that you want to share or that you think people need to know? So given your background, your expertise, what else should I have asked that people should know or that you really would love to share?
Gosh, that's such a big question.
And you've got time, so you can.
Yeah. I think a really key thing that I've learned along the way, during just my career and particularly my coaching career, is to listen to your gut. And as hokey it may sound, it's the absolute truth that your body is the best barometer you will ever have, because it will tell you when you're excited. It will tell you when you're like, ambivalent. It will tell you when you're bored, and it will tell you when you're actually, repulsed by something. And to pay attention to each one of those things, because there's great information in there. So if, your body is telling you, let's just say you're overwhelmed, to be able to drill into that. What is overwhelming me? What do I feel like I am not equipped to handle here? And that information can lead to so much growth and development. So to be continuously reflecting on those things and asking yourself those questions.
Yeah. No, that's excellent advice. I left a job early in my career because my body was telling me this is not a healthy place to be,
Mm-hmm.
and I've never looked back, and I was so thankful that I did listen to it. So no, that's great advice. In fact, I love that. Your body is your best barometer. So that's great. Well, anything else, Rebecca? Because this is so pertinent given what's going on right now.
Yeah, I would say, in particular, when it comes to overturning overwhelm, and identifying your limiting beliefs and assumptions, to start to really question them and create some safe tests to check their validity. So, for example, it's like if I am scared of saying no or pushing back to my boss or a colleague, like, okay, is there actually any evidence of them firing somebody for pushing back? Or where have people pushed back successfully, either with my boss or with another boss? And how have they done that? And what can I learn there? So to really continue with that and craft many experiments, because it's not just a one and done. These assumptions that we have are typically very deeply ingrained. And so it takes time to unwind. And they'll always be there to some extent, but over time, with a lot of practice, you can manage to turn the volume down a bit so that you have more choice in how you operate.
Yes, I love that. Is there an article that you've written that we could find or read, or that we should read?
Sure. I've written a few articles related to the topic of overwhelmed on HBR. One is called How to Deal with Feeling Constantly Overwhelmed.
Okay.
And another one that I just wrote a couple months ago, it just came out the other week on HBR, called Managers Adjust Your Expectations Without Lowering the Bar. Perfect. And there's another one, How to Stop Thinking About Work at 3 a.m.
That's great. Well, absolutely. I was telling someone the other day that, when you send a message to someone at 3 a.m., somebody who works for you, what messages are you really communicating? So,
right.
Well, that's excellent. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much. Thank you for being part of this summit. I always say that my goal is to help people make the rest of life the best of life. And so may the rest be the best for you.
Oh, thank you. I love that.
I hope that our paths continue to cross.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.